You know what? We need to do a better job.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming on this beautiful day today, Saturday. Welcome you all, and thank you to PS21 for hosting us tonight. I hope those of you in the back can hear me okay? Okay, I will try and keep that level of volume going. Just so you know, when we get to the discussion period for comments, we do have 2 wireless microphones which we can pass around so that everybody can hear you and so forth. My name is Michael Allen. I'm with Regrowth Planning. I've been assisting the town of Chatham with the update to the comprehensive plan and now the implementation of some zoning updates to try and implement some of the recommendations of that plan. And the purpose of today's meeting is we've been working with the Housing and the Zoning Update Committee collaboratively to try and identify some zoning changes that can address some of the housing needs of Chatham, particularly for seniors and young families, folks just out of college, just trying to find an apartment and so forth. And since our last public meeting back in June, I think, one of the things that we decided was to try and focus on 2 areas where we feel there's sort of a lower hanging fruit or more support for the areas of looking at accessory dwelling units and also single lot exemptions, which we're currently looking at. And we wanted to try and get some feedback and try and button those down and maybe move those pieces forward as we look at other parts of the zoning. So today, we're hoping to collect public comment on the 2 draft codes that we have available that are online at the town website. Right now, copies of the draft zoning amendments have been posted online. They've been available for, I think, about 2 or 3 weeks now. You can go to the town website under announcements page, and there's a link on that page for you to get directly to those documents if you haven't already. But today we're going to be going through the full text of the document. So today the agenda is, I'd like to sort of start out with a brief introduction of what we're doing. Then we'll get to reviewing the proposed ADU law, accessory dwelling unit law. Then we're going to pause and take comments and also read some comments we've already received from folks from the public already. Reserving about 45 minutes for that. Then we'll review the proposed single lot exemption law, and then again pause and take comments on that. If we have time left over at the end, we can go back and so forth. But the idea is to try and collect public comments right now. Before we start, for the folks at home on Zoom, I sincerely hope you can hear me. If you have any questions, I had said that this is really going to be a viewing only, but if you do have comments or questions, feel free to type them in the chat, and periodically, when we're in the comment section, I will try and check the chat and read out any comments that come through and try and address those as we go. And also, one other thing, we've noticed that there seems to be some confusion or misunderstanding about the differences between some of these things that we're talking about. One of them being 2 single-family dwellings on 1 lot versus accessory dwelling units versus single lot exemptions. Some folks have noted there's some confusion about that, so I just want to briefly just kind of explain what the differences are between those things. With 2 single-family dwelling units on 1 lot, this is something that's currently allowed in the zoning right now. It's allowed by right in all the residential districts. So if you have, say, a 5-acre parcel here with a house on it, 2 single-family dwellings on 1 lot allows you, with code enforcement approval, to build a second house on that lot, provided it has to meet all the minimum lot area for your district. So if the minimum lot size is 2.5 acres, you have to make 2.5 acres for this new house, and it has to meet all the required setbacks and height restrictions and so forth. So it's essentially like subdividing, but you're not subdividing yet. The caveat is you have to be able to future subdivide and make it a legal conforming lot at some point in the future. So, for example, if you were to build this house for your parents or your children so that they can live on the same property with you, and then years later decide you don't need this arrangement anymore. You can subdivide the lot and break away and go off into California because you want to get away from your in-laws or whatever. You have that option, and it's a clean break. So that's 2 single-family units on 1 lot. That's not what we're discussing today, really. What we're discussing today is accessory dwelling units, which would mean on that same parcel, you would be able to build the accessory dwelling unit on there, either for a family member to live on site, or you want is it rental income or so forth. You would be able to do that. It's not intended to be subdividable, and you would be able to create a new dwelling without having the cost of buying additional land or subdividing the land. So it's intended to be an easier, lower cost method of providing more housing. And then finally, the single lot exemption, the third option, is, let's say right now you have a 5-acre lot, but you can't subdivide because the minimum lot size is 5 acres in where you are, so you can't subdivide. Single lot exemption would allow you a one-time only option to subdivide off a small parcel of that, let's say 1 acre, to build a smaller house adjacent to your property that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise because the zoning would require it. You're only allowed to do it once, and it creates a separate ownership. It's not tied to your house. It doesn't move with your house. And it creates another dwelling unit with 2 benefits, and that is it's reduced land cost for creating this, and also reduced taxes because you're on a much smaller lot and presumably smaller house. So those are the kind of the three different options. So getting into accessory dwelling units, just a little bit of background right now. Part of the reason we started getting into this is because a couple of years ago, the state of New York started to draft legislation on regulating accessory dwelling units, and it was designed to require every town to have an accessory dwelling unit code that had minimum standards to it. And that was how it was originally written. It's now, since it's still going through the draft legislation in the House and Senate, right now it's morphed into creating more of an incentive and opt-in program. So would be right now, at least as currently drafted, an opt-in program for municipalities who pass a local law that allows accessory dwelling units with, I think right now, a 5-year window where municipalities can opt into this program before it expires. It sets minimum standards for how accessory dwelling units can be allowed. For example, they have to be allowed in all places that are zoned for single-family, multifamily, residential, or in any property that already has residential land use on it right now legally. And it needs to be reviewed very simply as far as administratively, so that it's just a one-stop shop where you can come in and get approval to build as long as you meet all the requirements. And the municipality would have to submit a copy of their local law for accessory dwelling units to the state, get them to say, okay, this meets our requirements. And it's important because if you meet the requirements, there's a couple of benefits to it. From the municipality's standpoint, if the municipality is approved with their accessory dwelling unit code, they would get a 10% increase in points on any consolidated funding application. So when the town applies for funding to do stuff, they would get increased points on their scoring application, a 10% increase in funding aid, increased eligibility for infrastructure, transportation, and economic development grants. So there's an incentive for the town to want to participate in this beyond that of just, we're trying to address the housing issue. There's also a potential for tax breaks or tax exemptions where municipalities, this law would also enable municipalities to pass a local law which would provide a tax break to anybody who builds an accessory dwelling unit under this program. So in other words, you wouldn't be taxed on the increased value of the assessed value of your property because you added this new feature to your property. So for the first 5 years, it's 100% tax exempt. And for the 5 years after that, it starts to gradually step down in percentages until a full 10 years is expired, and then at that point. So it's not just a municipality property tax, but hypothetically, a school district can pass a resolution to agree to the same thing. I don't know if that would happen, but that's the way the legislation is written right now. So the tax break would last for 10 years or until the house is sold to a non-family member, or it's not inherited and so forth. So that provides perhaps an additional incentive so that you're not, if you build an accessory dwelling unit, you're not burdened with the additional taxes. You have 10 years to try and soften that. And then finally, the third option is this program that is being drafted by the state right now would provide construction funding to build an accessory dwelling unit. So the funding program and providing technical assistance for qualifying homeowners to construct an ADU or renovate their house to create an ADU in their house within any eligible townships. So if you use the funding, you would agree to rent the ADU for a period of 15 years below market rate. They don't specify exactly what that means. And qualifying homeowners, they're right now defining as between 80% and 120% of the median area income. I don't know what they mean by area, but if you just look at Chatham right now, the median income is about $92,000. So I'm estimating based on that, it would be somewhere between 73 and 100,000, 110,000 a year. Your household income to qualify for this funding to build. So something to keep in mind, and something we've been trying to keep in mind as we move forward with this. Right now, this is the text of the draft code that we have established right now that's online. I worry that some of you might not be able to read this from this distance, but I'm going to read through it as we go along. Right now, this would go in chapter 180, which is the zoning chapter. And it starts with a finding statement that explains why it is that we're doing this based on what we found during the comprehensive plan process about concerns about seniors not being able to afford to live here anymore, and also young folks not being able to find apartments, that we wanted to try and address that. So the creation of accessory dwelling units, we're hoping to increase the supply of available living quarters in the area, and also provide homeowners potentially with some supplemental income from renting, and create a living arrangement where perhaps seniors or our elders can still live in Chatham and live on our property or so forth if we so desire. The permitted locations for this accessory dwelling units would be permitted by right in all zoning districts which permit single family, two family, or multifamily residential uses. So all the hamlet districts, RL1, RL2, RL3, technically even the business district, because single family is allowed there. And all properties which have a lawfully existing residential use on them at the time of adoption of this code. So if you have a residence, but you're not in a residential district anymore, perhaps the zoning changed years ago, you'd still be allowed to do this. The number of dwelling units you'd be permitted to build is just one per property. So it's one dwelling unit, you can have multiple bedrooms, but one dwelling unit, not multifamily. The area and bulk requirements, the accessory dwelling units are exempt from the density limitations. We need to do that because it would be increasing the density per what is allowed in the zoning right now, because you'd be doubling the number of dwelling units. Accessory dwelling units constructed as a new accessory structure shall comply with all the applicable setback and height restrictions. So it's just like you're building a new single-family home, you would have to comply with all the setback and height requirements in the applicable building code and fire codes. An accessory dwelling unit may be constructed within an existing accessory building. So if you have, say, a barn or a garage, an outbuilding, you could renovate that, turn that into an accessory dwelling unit wholly within that without increasing the size of it or anything. So it wouldn't be affecting what the required setbacks or heights are, because you're building within an existing building. You can also build within your existing house,
or build a new structure or build an addition. Accessory dwelling units may be created on any lot that meets the minimum lot size for your district. So right now, as this is written, you would need to have a legally conforming lot, not what we call an undersized lot, one that's too small for the minimum. That came up as a question recently. Somebody questioned, well, what if I have an undersized lot? Should I still be allowed to? And that's something we're going to have to discuss. We haven't parsed out that option yet, so that's something we want to discuss. The size of an attached or detached accessory dwelling shall not exceed 1,500 square feet. So if you're building a separate building or adding on to your house, we didn't want the accessory dwelling unit being larger than 1,500 square feet because we don't, the idea behind this is to create smaller, more affordable housing. We don't necessarily want somebody to come in and build an 8,000 square foot house on the property as a freebie. Because that feels like that they'd be taking advantage of what this is really intended to accomplish. And accessory dwelling units are not permitted to be constructed within the front yard. They would have to be from your house or back, and that's fairly standard for any accessory structure. Under the terms and conditions, one of the important terms of this, which is allowed under the pending legislation that's being drafted by New York State, we're allowed to say that the owner of the property must reside on the property as their primary residence. They can't be, this can't be a secondary home that they're building and so forth. So they would have to live in either the primary home or even have the option of living in the accessory dwelling unit as their primary residence. The accessory dwelling unit shall meet all applicable state, county, building, and fire codes applicable to a single-family home, including water and sewer service capability, as well as code requirements under the town law before a building permit or a certificate of occupancy is issued. And the building permit fee, it's not very much, but we're trying to reduce it to make it a little bit easier. The accessory dwelling unit shall include fully independent kitchen, bathrooms, sleeping, living area, which has a separate and distinct entrance in and out. You don't have to walk through your house to get to it. The accessory dwelling unit shall have access in and out of the dwelling, which is separate and independent. I think I just said that. And then no additional off-street parking is required because of the accessory dwelling unit. So you'd be able to accommodate the parking on site. Accessory dwelling units may be constructed of manufactured or modular home construction in any district where that construction is allowed. An accessory dwelling unit may be created through new construction of a completely separate building. I think I mentioned this. Conversion of it, like renovating your existing house, adding on to your existing house, or built within a garage or other existing separate structure. So there's a lot of flexibility in how you do that. And accessory dwelling units created under this chapter are intended to remain as an accessory unit. They're not intended or allowed to be subdivided off later. And then finally, review and approvals. Applications for these would be processed by the code enforcement officer. And if they've obtained a valid building permit. And then lastly, all pre-existing structures that are currently being used as ADUs right now, whether it's legal or not, they will be made whole through a process where they can be brought up to whatever requirements we have here and without any penalty to the particularly to whoever's renting it right now in particular. So those are the basic forms of the code that we have written right now. So I want to open it up. I'm just going to check my time here. It's supposed to be at 2:20, I think. Let's see how I did here.
2:22.
Anyway, so at this point, I would like to open it up to comments from the crowd. We've got till about 3:05 before we move on, and then we'll take it from there. And yes, sir, in the front, just because you're the easiest to see.
Hi, my name is Richard Dodgman. I live in Chatham Center. I guess I could be called an economist, but financial analyst is what I prefer. I was hired by a firm that made recommendations on or bought land and buildings. And okay, I take it that you're an expert in this area and were paid for by the board. And they also knew exactly what your viewpoints were before you were hired. So you're different, no different than a lawyer defending a murderer in trial. We should not look at your expertise at all. Is that fair?
I think we jumped ahead a bit by murder.
House robber, whatever you want to call it. But I just want to comment on a couple of things. All of your suggestions are way cute little ways of getting around the law. And when you talk about tax exemptions, you're talking about tax increases for somebody else. Because with their tax exemptions, the amount of taxes, the amount the town needs don't go down. In fact, they go up.
The amount of tax revenue that the town collects wouldn't go down.
Well, there would be more people to serve. And if you didn't have that exemption, they would have more taxes. So therefore, as the town needs change, we have someone that isn't carrying the weight.
So you would be against the town passing a local law to provide tax exemptions for people who wanted to build these ADUs? Is that effectively what you're saying?
I'm against passing laws that would raise taxes to people who are already having difficulty finding and maintain living in affordable housing. And I just like to comment, housing is pretty easy to understand. At any given moment, you might say there are 30 million people who are looking for homes. And there are only 27 million homes. So we're 3 million short, which is the number that's usually accepted. So the price of the 27 million homes will all go up until 3 million people who want to buy them can't bid anymore. So we get down to 27 million buyers and 27 million sellers, and we can do business. And there's another thing people say, well, my father was able to own his own house, and I have the same job as he do, and I can't. Well, the house he's buying today has much better insulation, is probably larger, has much more expensive windows, much more efficient heating system, and all of these things are positive, but they increase the cost. Now, there are plenty of people who can build these 3 million additional houses, but they are building basically McMansions for 1 million to 2 million homes. They can make money on that.
Excuse me.
That's good. I want to give this a lot.
I want
There's a lot of
you,
people with questions.
okay,
Yeah, what's your question?
I want you to tell me how you think that if I gave you the land, you could build an affordable home.
We can't control the private market. We can't control.
No, I mean,
Here's
there's 5 acres or whatever you need.
So
Now go build a home that's affordable. Do you think that's possible?
I think it's challenging, but it's doable. And it won't happen if we don't do something. If the argument today is, this isn't realistic because prices are insane right now, it's very difficult to buy stuff. Yeah, that's true, but we can't control that part. The one part we can control is what you're allowed to do. And if we give people the ability to build more stuff, then it's more likely that that will work itself out. I'm going to take another question here. Yes, ma'am, wait.
Hi, Cindy Bowsing from Chatham. I'm just curious if the committee has tackled the very thorny definition of primary residence, which, gets mixed definitions, with all the second homes in the area. Have you tackled that yet?
I'm not sure I follow the question. The idea of the primary residence is where you consider your home, where you pay taxes, and that's where you spend most of the year living.
The address you give the IRS, would that be accurate as your primary home?
I believe so. I mean,
Well, it's a slippery definition. I think in New York City, in order to claim primary residence, you have to actually show receipts that you buy things in New York City and live there more than 6 months of the year, for instance.
right.
So it can become quite technical. And I think without that, you run into potential problems with people who have 2 or 3 homes.
I mean, I don't think it's that complicated. When we moved to a different school district and so forth, we had to show with bills and tax records that this was our primary residence. I didn't remember it being that. Are you suggesting folks are gonna trick the system or game the system? Is that your concern?
Potentially.
Yes.
We do now already
Where do you vote?
to avoid income tax.
Okay, let's
So
just,
your
let's,
concern would be, how can we enforce the primary residence
Yes.
factor? Okay.
And there's reams of litigation involving that for political offices. And you're opening up a can of worms. And basically, people are gonna buy these houses and rent both or one of them. And
To do as an off-site rental where they can just make money? Okay, so that's your concern?
well, that and the fact that I'm against this. I'll tell you that right now. For the years coming up to this event, we were all told in the town of Chatham, we moved here, this is kind of a special place, rural, it's not that far from the city, New York City by train, it's not that far from Albany, which is the next biggest city.
Historical.
And well, that's a good point. And people were encouraged to try to keep Chatham rural, how to keep Chatham farming. People have bought land, put it in land conservancies. And now we get a new administration here that comes in and wants to make Chatham basically, as Kate says, East Greenbush. And most of the people in this community do not want this.
I understand that.
And people are gonna take the position that if this does come to pass, we're gonna be against the administration that's pushing it. And people have invested a lot of time, effort. My wife and I have put a lot of land in the conservancy. And we have a fishing easement on our property and we're happy to have people come and fish there. But I don't want to have a fishing easement on my property in the middle of an apartment situation.
Okay.
And that's, people in the community are against this.
Okay, well, I understand. Part of the reason that we're trying to do these 2 things with the ADUs and single lot exemptions is because we feel that there are small steps that won't
Well,
greatly
let's-
change the character of Chatham.
You're basically taking a single lot and making it, you're doubling the amount of land that can be built on in the community.
that's true.
You're ruining the entire town by doing this, bottom line. You know,
Exactly.
maybe that's the bottom line. Everybody that's been here, who either moved up here because of the bucolic nature of where we are, right, or they wanted to get out of the city. Quite frankly, a lot of the people that I see up here now that are new don't even understand country living. I think everybody around here that I see, that a lot of people that I know do understand country living. And what you're trying to do in this group is trying to ruin all of that because for some reason you think it's going to be better for everybody. It's not, in my opinion.
Right, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Wait.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so
before they speak.
I'm pretty much against this also, but I want some technical answers to some questions. The goals are admirable, to provide senior housing, to provide young family housing, but I don't understand how this would help people age in place unless all the homes were in the village. And unless all of this happened in the village where there are services, where I'm 68. I live in Chatham Center on Route 28. I've owned my house for 25 years. I used to be a weekend person. Now I live here full time. But if I were to buy a home today to age in, I wouldn't buy it 4 miles from the nearest carton of milk. You know, I'm going to age there because I already own it, but certainly that's not really a good idea. Wouldn't apartments or condos in town, in the village, near the village, be a more practical solution?
Right.
So for the younger families, and this, I would just say it once, and then I won't have to say it again when we get to the next one. How are you gonna guarantee that the people who need this get to have it? If you could tell me that every single thing built here would go to a young family that was struggling, you know, with a couple of kids and trying to get started in life, if you could tell me that, I might change my mind about it, but I don't actually believe that.
So you're worried that we don't really have control over who would be moving into these places?
You just said you don't have control over the market. So, you know, it would not be difficult to say, this is my primary residence and spend most of the year in Florida. And I also am curious about what is the smallest lot on which one could do this process? Because a 1,500 square foot house is about 30 by 40. Moving around, but how big does the lot have to be to put that structure on it in this program?
It depends on the district and the setbacks, but I don't know offhand, but it depends on what district and how you configure it.
Okay, what's the
You can build it
smallest?
as an addition or inside your own home.
Okay, but what's the smallest lot this could be done on?
1.5.
Don't know offhand.
1.5 acres, you just
Well,
said.
I believe that.
So none of it, so are there lots of 1.5 acres within the village of Chatham?
I don't know in the village and the hamlets there are.
Well, I understand, that's why I'm asking. So this is really affects the hamlets and not the village of Chatham?
But we don't have control over the village, that's separate. I can't do anything
Oh, I
about
see,
zoning.
all right, see.
And zoning in the village is separate. Yes, you have a microphone already, so I'm gonna let you
Let me
go.
turn it on. Is it on? Okay, Rick Waterways. And I have a question in the terms and conditions where it says ADU shall not subsequently be subdivided or sold as separate properties. Does the town actually have the capacity to ensure that doesn't happen? Is there a way to register this on deeds? Do we have to do it with the county?
We would
what's the
probably have to
mechanism?
do it either with a deed restriction or a plat restriction, similar to how, and we'll cover this with single lot exemptions. We have a similar mechanism in there where, because it's a one-time process, the deed and plat would need to be recorded with no further subdivisions based on this law. So that would be, there has been talk among the committees that I've been working with that they're not exactly sure how they keep track of this. They would have to keep a list or maybe get help from the county on keeping track of it. But it depends on how many applications go through. We're allowed to do 2 single-family houses on 1 lot in town. That's been on the books for, I don't know how many years. But
Since
I don't know how many-
1972.
I don't think there's, since when?
72.
1972, okay. To my knowledge, there hasn't been very many takers on that. So,
I
don't
disagree
know how
with
many
you on that.
takers
There are a
would
lot of
be
people that
for
have
this.
housing.
Sorry, yes, in the beige jacket.
Hello, okay. You know, I'm sensitive to what this, one of the last speakers said about, people within town that need to downsize. And it's only a suggestion to address that issue. But could this be written so that people in town that want to downsize get first priority?
There might be a mechanism for that, I'm not sure how it would work, I don't think it would work, like officially in the zoning, it would have to be through a separate program that was monitored by the town. We've talked about ways of trying to keep a renters list of people who live or work locally, that they can sign up to get first dibs on any apartments that become available, because that's something that's come up multiple times, but we're not exactly sure how that would operate. I think that would have to be a separate process outside of the zoning. Yes, ma'am, Red,
The village has water, it has sewer, it has shopping areas. I wonder if the town of Chatham has talked with the town of Ghent, because of half the village of Chatham is in the town of Ghent. And I've lived here all my life, and it seems to me, just my idea of the spaces in the village of Chatham, the Ghent side has the empty spaces. That why aren't we putting some sort of agreement between Chatham and Ghent to put those living areas? It's going to have to be on the town line, the Chatham-Ghent town line. I can right now visualize chunks of acres that are vacant right on the Ghent and Chatham line. And then there's the Chatham Middle School. We don't need that anymore for the students. We don't have any kids in Chatham. Make that into living area, but that is also in the town of Ghent. Has the town of Chatham talked to the town of Ghent about establishing these low-cost living or senior living areas? Because that seems to me what you got to do, because that's where the water is, that's where the sewerage is, that's where the shopping is, and we have no public transportation. The idea of sticking people out in the town of Chatham and the hinterlands, low-income housing, do they have transportation? There isn't transportation, no reliable Medicaid transportation. It needs to be in the village, and this is not gonna work.
One more, and then I want to get to some comments that we received in some online questions. The person with the microphone, and then the person in front of you.
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah.
Yeah.
I live in the village. Everyone always says, put everything in the village.
Wait.
I don't understand. Let me
Please
finish.
speak.
Oh, what do I do? Hello, can you hear that now? Pardon me. I live in the village, and I've heard at every single one of these meetings, put it in the village, put it in the village, put it in the village. What I don't understand is my mother. If I had a place in the country, I would want my mother close by so I could keep an eye on her, and she would want her own place. Now in the country, all these rural places that are so secret, they all have a barn, they have a studio, they have all these accessory buildings already that are accommodating, they might not have somebody living in there, but they have 36-hour studios, they have horses, they have children, they have everything going on. I don't think it needs to be regulated to one area where everyone's just put. It needs to be spread throughout the whole town. And for many years, the whole town had children, had elderly, all amidst the whole town. The old historic photographs that were in Kinderhook, they all had children, they all had grandparents living together, working together, not segregated into some special place where they need to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, in the Lake Blue, Johnny.
Hi, has the town done any kind of demographic study on how many people that actually currently live? Just so you can hear me? Now, people that actually currently live in the town, have we done a demographic survey on how many people are we talking that need ADUs and affordable housing? Is it 50 people that actually currently live in the town of Chatham? Is it 500 people? I think if you're focusing on the people who already live here, seniors, young people, but do we even know, has anybody ever figured out how many people we're talking about?
I don't know an exact number. I do know from the comprehensive plan survey, we did get a lot of responses, especially from older respondents saying that they were concerned about being able to still afford to live here. I don't have an exact number, but I think that we'll be looking at 500 new units being brought in by this. I think it's probably closer in the dozens. So the idea is we're trying to help what little we can.
But shouldn't we address the numbers of people that actually already live here and find that out? And then put out X number of permits for ADUs rather than everybody getting a permit to do an ADU.
Would a cap on the number of ADUs?
Well, maybe a cap, but I think we need to know about the people that actually currently are living here.
Right.
Not just say, sure, everybody build a second home on your property, no matter where it is.
Okay. Sorry, back to your question, ma'am, with the best. We did look at it, and in the comprehensive plan, we talked about trying to find areas adjacent to the village because they already have the density and the sidewalk and utilities and all of that, which lends itself better to higher density, less expensive living. The idea of finding areas where we could put some higher density zones there. In discussions with the committee, we tabled that temporarily because we weren't sure exactly where would be the best place to put that, and that involves a little bit more coordination with the village. We haven't tackled it yet, but that is something that is in the comprehensive plan, and it's something we are planning on looking at. We felt this was a slightly easier topic to bite off. How are we doing? We have a comment or two. Hopefully nobody said anything bad on the screen. Somebody asked, what on earth is country living? What I hear is wealthy landowners NIMBY complaints without concern to the future of our community. And the whole point is that young people leave here and don't live here because there's nowhere to rent. So I'll check back and see if there's any other.
I'm not wealthy and I live in a 1,400 square foot house.
People don't leave because they don't have any rent. They don't have any jobs. That's why. They're leaving town because there's nobody to make money for them. And that's normal.
There's lots of jobs here.
Michael, could we?
Can I go?
Gary's had his hand up since the beginning.
I have a microphone. I take the hostage.
Go.
Hi, my name's Ann Marshall. I live on the county 17 in Chatham. A couple things. I want to thank everybody who's done all this work that I could sit here and come and hear options. And for the gentleman, I didn't get your name. You're very brave. I thank you for your time standing up there and listening to it. So I just wanted to two things. We moved here, I don't know, 20 years ago. Raised our son here, went to Chatham. He's a young professional. He's college educated, so are his friends, and they need, quote unquote, which used to mean something different in the past, affordable housing. So they're professionals. They have cars, they have good jobs. There's nowhere for them to live cost effective. So I just like to keep that in mind when we're talking about affordable housing. It's our young folks, it's our professionals, they're our jobs.
Thank you.
Yes, sorry.
Given the Pierce Smith Woolbridge, given the purported housing shortage, and I say that because I understand there are a number of vacant properties around that are being underutilized. Has any consideration been given to allowing more of these units on larger lots? Say someone had 70 or 100 acres, say one for every 10 acres. And I only ask that as a question. I would not support any of this except as an alternative to commercial development.
Okay. When you're talking about larger properties, like 100 acres, maybe 10, I think we've been trying to avoid stuff like that only because we don't want to eat up tons of farmland. And our thought was these two elements that we're proposing right now have a softer footprint or a much smaller footprint and should hypothetically have less of an impact, not just on land area taken up, but also just visual change. That's the idea. We've been trying to avoid, one of the first topics that came up is why don't we reduce minimum lot sizes in the districts in town? And my feeling on that very strongly is I don't want to do that because then we're just going to invite commercial developers to come in and start subdividing up and building a bunch of houses that are already too expensive for half the people already.
What do you anticipate the percentage impact of this being to alleviating the problem?
I mean, my gut says maybe 5 or 10%. I don't know. It depends on how the market works as far as interest rates, building construction costs, and so forth. Right now, they're not in our favor. The folks that are doing stuff like this are folks like the woman we bought our house from. She sold her house to have money to build an ADU, and then moved into that, leveraged that money to build the ADU. Then she had a place that was smaller, 1-story floor, more amenable to her. It was really just tailored to her, and she had extra cash in her pocket from the sale of her house. So that worked out. Not everybody has that ability. Another thing you can do is, well, anyway, I'm not here to talk. Yes, sir, next person.
Hi, Dan, Chatham, Porter. I do have a specific question, but I also have a kind of a unique perspective on this. The house my wife and I live in now was built by a doctor who had a property next door before this law was to be considered. He bought the lot and built a very, very small house for his aging mother next to his home, so he could be next to her.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. My very, very quiet voice. That's my bad. I was saying, I currently live in a place that was built by a doctor who bought the lot next to his house and put up a very, very small home for his aging mother. We moved into that house, and the only reason we can afford, my wife and I, who are young professionals, just like one of the previous speakers mentioned, the only reason we can afford to live here is because it's a very small house in a neighborhood of very large, very expensive homes. The other reason that was possible is because this doctor built a smaller home for his mother in the area. This was long before this was ever considered, so it is a separate lot and it is a separate house, but we're very happy to be part of this community. We love it here a great deal, and we wouldn't have had the chance to live here if not for this kind of proto accessory dwelling unit. We're very, very happy to have you guys all as our neighbors. My question was, because it used to be essentially a very small home for a retiree, is it possible that if we ever wanted to build a slightly larger house on the property to classify our current home as an ADU and kind of pass it forward to the next generation? Would that be something that you guys would consider?
The way this is currently drafted, in part because of the way that the pending or drafted New York State legislation right now makes it pretty clear that people should be able to live in either the accessory dwelling unit or the primary. So you can switch. You can move into the accessory dwelling unit, make that your primary residence, and then make your old home the accessory dwelling unit, depending on your needs. So you have that flexibility. I just want to read into the record. Somebody did submit written comments, which they've asked. They weren't able to attend today, so they've asked, I will be unable to attend the public meeting. I'd like my thoughts presented at that meeting for this written correspondence. Two parts. One, they talk about single lot exemptions, which I will get into when we cover that. Their comments on ADUs are: individual standalone residential dwelling units should be restricted to single family use and no more than 1,200 square feet of dwelling space. These structures should be limited to 3 bedrooms, number of bedrooms determines septic capacity, and 1 accessory structure, like a 2-car garage, would be allowed. No additions, either horizontally or vertically, would be allowed in perpetuity. Such ADUs should have standalone electric well and septic. The reasoning I have behind these recommendations are as follows. First, I have yet to hear a description of income levels that we are seeking affordable housing. What are we talking about here? What income level is in need of such housing, including working parents and a family of 4, working couples with no children, single people, seniors? Please provide income levels so that it is easier to ascertain what exactly is affordable housing. What financial demographics are we attempting to satisfy? Please state this. The objective of these changes is to allow for the construction of housing that is more affordable for town residents. A 2,000 square foot house is very large, and quite honestly, with site work would be in excess of $400,000 to build without counting the cost of the land, and this is hardly in the affordable category for the people seeking such housing. If we use the 400,000 number as the final price of an ADU, including land, then that would be $80,000 down to make 20% mortgage financing, and this would finance $320,000. If the mortgage term is 30 years at 5.5% interest, then the mortgage payment alone would be $1,817 a month. At a 4% mortgage rate, the payment is still $1,528 a month. Is that an affordable mortgage? The recent survey was talking about $1,000 a month as desirable for rent, and this is before property taxes and utilities and general upkeep of the property. The reason for reducing the size of the ADU from 2,000 to 1,200 is to retain the idea of affordability. The reason for reducing the lot size is along the same lines. Furthermore, if the lot and ADU were both smaller, it should reduce the individual property tax, including property school tax burdens. I'm not sure how much. Property taxes on these ADUs would be a significant addition to the monthly mortgage payment for a house in the new Lebanon school district. In the town of Chatham, a house valued assessed for $400,000 will have an overall property tax bill of around $6,300 a year. That's $525 a month on top of the mortgage payments noted above. This brings the entire monthly payment over $2,300 a month for higher mortgage rate and $2,000 a month for the lower. Does this fit with the affordability model? Whatever affordability means, isn't this the current average rental cost in town right now? That cost that everyone says is currently too high. In my opinion, the size of the ADU and the underlying lot sizes needs to be reduced. I also think the zoning update should be restricted to the RL3 and Hamlet 1 and 2 districts. But I needed to read that into the record. And as far as what we're looking at as far as targeting, if you are an administrative assistant, teacher, waiter, waitress making $30,000–$40,000 a year, to not be overly burdened with spending more than 30% of your salary on housing, we're looking at, those folks would be looking at rent in the range of like $500 to $750 for a $25,000 salary. At a $30,000 salary, let's say $750 rent, $35,000 salary, $874 rent, $45,000 salary, $1,125, and it goes up from there. Anecdotally, yesterday I checked to see a search on various websites what rental properties are available right now in Chatham. There are 3. The first one is $11,000 a month. The second one was $2,200 a month, which is not too bad, but it's only available from Christmas until May every year. Not terribly useful for someone. The third one was $1,800 a month for 2 bedrooms. Not too bad. So basically one useful one out there. There's not a lot out there, and we have a lot of people out here that can't afford even some of those things. So I want to get back to taking some more questions. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I'm unclear about the ADU as far as being able to, I thought I heard that you would be able to sell that unit. But my original impression for ADUs was that they always had to be part of the original property.
That's
So
correct.
that's my question.
They would stay with the property.
It would,
Yes.
so it can't be
Unless
separate
you were
ownership.
to do something similar to a 2 single-family units on one lot.
Yeah, but I just wanted to make sure that the ADU it would not be separate ownership. You can't sell it.
You can subdivide it though.
Right now,
You can subdivide it and then sell it.
No.
If you have the
Supposed to be
setbacks
deeded
and all
out.
that, but yeah.
yeah, and you would have to meet all the setback and lot area and everything, which
Right.
basically you're doing 2 single-family.
But then you would move into the other category.
Yes. Yes, sir, agreed.
It's my understanding now in our residential districts that most properties can have an ADU. And that, it can't be sold separately, but with the main house, you can have an ADU in most of the districts.
Under the current zoning, we don't have a provision for that.
Well, people have apartments in garage and
Yes.
barns,
People-
and they get building permits for it, and that's an ADU.
Right.
And I know
it's a
somebody
slightly
now that's
different
making a
animal.
mother-in-law apartment.
Just really, may I interrupt just 1 second? Just to be sure that we're able to record this, and ask that we do keep passing the mics, because that is one thing we're trying to keep track of.
Okay.
We could lose your comment, that's it. So, I'm sorry.
Some people are projecting quite well.
I know, but
Well, it was my understanding that in most of the residential districts, you can have an ADU. And then you can't sell it separately, but as part of the lot. I know people that are converting apartments with building department approval, converting barns and garages to apartments, or building a separate entity. Right up on Riders Mill Road, the Sabbath Vineyard sold, and there's 2 little houses in the front yard.
Okay, I don't know that specifically, but I can discuss that with the committee. Yes, the raised mic.
Thanks. So as of now, every lot in town has the right to 2 residences. And I saw in some of the pending legislation from the state that there would be incentives for people to put up ADUs. But since we already have the right here in Chatham to 2 residences a lot, what is it that we can do to encourage people to build these smaller units as opposed to just building a residence and then asking for a subdivision to sell off, which has always been a big fear of mine with the current zoning?
Well, I mean, part of what the incentive would be, is, well, I think there's a much greater need right now. If you were to do something like this, it would most certainly get aligned. Second of all, the state options that they're looking at right now with providing funding assistance and also technical assistance, and also the potential, if the town and or the school district wish, they could provide the tax exemption for 10 years on any improvements that were related to that ADU. So that helps to soften the blow of making these improvements.
I have a follow-up then.
Okay.
Given that we want to encourage more affordable housing in town, is the committee and then hopefully the town board going to consider revising the zoning code so that you don't have the right to a second residence on every lot, but rather you have the right to do an ADU?
If
not, I would urge them to do that.
So in other words, if we're gonna do the ADU thing, get rid of the 2 single-family units on one lot, and do ADUs, which hypothetically should be less troublesome.
Correct.
Okay, that's a good suggestion. That's something we can discuss. We got about 5 more minutes before we move on to the next topic. Gentleman in orange first, and then man in front second. That's the microphone.
Thank you.
Everyone's wearing different colors today.
Try to be bright. My name is Mike Leader. I live on Route 17 in Chatham Center. I have a question for you, or clarification that I'm looking for. I would say generally I lean towards preserving rural character in the town and trying to limit density, but I do understand the tug and pull and wanting to create some affordable housing. My question is, you've made a couple of comments today, as we're just focusing on ADUs, that implied that the committee has been thinking about this after perhaps after the last open house that we had when we were at the fire station, where there was a very strong reaction, in my opinion, to the spectrum of options that were put on the board. And I would say, 90% of the people in the room felt pretty opposed to the vast majority of those options. And you've sort of implied a few times that ADUs are meant to be, sort of a little bit of a solution to that, or an option among that range that is meant to be more preserving of the rural character of the town and a little less changing Chatham. Is it fair to say that whatever version of this might get pushed through, whether it's exactly like this or whether some additional modifications get made along lines of comments that have been made today, is it fair to say that that's all the committee's looking for now? And it's effectively a trade, like, give us this. We don't no longer want to build townhouse communities. We no longer want to, except to the extent it's already approved, we no longer want to build big subdivisions, and we don't want that. Is that what's being said here? Because I think it would maybe change the dynamic in the room if that were true.
Okay. Our takeaway from the last meeting, we provided a huge laundry list of options. As you say, a lot of them, there was a lot of pushback to. Our takeaway from that was, well, some of the ones that didn't receive as much pushback were the AUs, that people seem to be maybe okay with that, so that's why we're pursuing this right now. But there are still other factors on the table that the committee is looking at as far as other housing near the village or other multifamily housing, but those are bigger things that we're trying to tackle later on. We're trying to see what can we get accomplished with this for right now, but there's still other factors.
So it's not straight up a trade. No, it's not like give us this, and then we want to do that.
The committee's still working on other things right now.
Okay.
Sorry, man, I believe you were next.
Thank you. With an ADU, I kind of picture it as you have a residence and then you have another unit within a smaller space than you would build something brand new. Like on my property, I have a residence, and then behind me, I have a garage that has an apartment over top of it, which is completely legal. And to me, when I read this new law, it sounds like this would then be considered an ADU, where I would think I should have the right, if I wanted to move off my property and rent out my residence and still have the apartment. So how, I don't understand how.
So you're saying that's
So
your
why
primary
should,
residence right now.
yeah,
and
why
it's
should,
legal.
and I do know that there are other ones where people did live in the main residence and then they eventually moved on. So with this proposal, it almost sounds like you have to sell it or leave one of them empty.
That's a good question. So by passing this, you're operating legally right now, but by accepting this new law, that would tie your hands. You wouldn't be able to not have a primary residence anymore. That's a good point.
Right.
Okay.
From my understanding at the state level, you have to have a residence, but the owner does not have to live in it. And then you have the ADU. So I'm not quite sure how that fits in.
Okay.
Some of the things, I think these are really good ideas of how to increase our housing, but I do think both need to be worked on.
Okay. Thank you. One more question, and then I want to get to a couple things of the planning board. I think. Yes, ma'am.
You read the statistics of how much 30% of the various income levels are. But so in order for this to be successful, these buildings, these ADUs have to be within those rent ranges, or what's the point? If it's just building buildings to rent out at high numbers, which you can, why would this work? I don't see, unless you can regulate it, how it will make any difference, because the market will put the prices of these ADUs up beyond the people we're trying to target.
True, but I don't really like the idea of saying, well, the market's going to make this unaffordable, so we shouldn't do anything. I think we should try and make it available. I mean, as I can use myself as an example, and maybe that's not fair. We rented out an ADU, my wife and I, we didn't want to be landlords, but we decided to rent out to a local elementary school kids or a kindergarten teacher. We charge $800 a month. We could charge probably double that, but we just choose to. It's $800 a month for us. It's free and it's cheap rent for her. Win-win. I don't want to jack up the rent to $1,200 or $1,500 just because that's what I could get. I do it because we both win. A couple of things. I want to make sure. I believe where did it go? My notes as far as some other questions and comments came up. I believe some of these came from the planning board. I'm not sure, but with 2 dwellings on one lot, would both of the residents be allowed to have an ADU? My answer is no. It's only one per property. It's only one per residential property. If you have 2 dwelling units on one lot, that's one property. So you would only be allowed to have one, until that property is subdivided later on, then that becomes 2 properties. They would each be allowed to have an ADU. Can you do an ADU on an undersized lot? I think I covered that right now, not as it's currently written, but we could discuss whether or not it gets complicated. Like, how small a lot do you want to allow this? Can an ADU be multifamily? No, it's one dwelling unit. Does the ADU require owner to live on the property as primary residence? We cover that, yes. And is shared septic allowed? And the answer is if it would meet the code capacity to meet the county health standards, then I believe so, unless we wanted to dictate it has to be separate. But that would make it an additional cost burden. 1 or 2 more questions before we move on to SLEs. Yes, sir, in the blue hat.
Okay, Peter McKenna, to Green Can. Anyways, I have a question, 2 questions. As far as the ADU, is there any restrictions on what type of architectural design or anything to conform with the rural area where you're going to be putting one, or could you just put in a double wide as long as it conforms to the 1,500 or less square feet? Are trailers allowed? And the other thing too is I live on a dirt road and we're trying to preserve the dirt road. And if you increase the population on that road by double, that would increase the traffic and everything. And before you know it, they're going to want to pave the road. And I don't know, has that been taken into account, that extra maintenance and things that go along with doubling the population?
Well, do you think this would actually double the population?
Right. Well, if you double the housing, you would think it would double.
Well, I think, okay, better question. Do you think this would double the housing?
I'm sorry, what?
Do you feel that this would actually double the housing in Chatham?
Well, that's what you're proposing, isn't it?
Just the right.
And you have the right to do it, but right now, people are taking advantage of doubling the housing on their lot right now as it is, possibly because of the lot size restrictions, but I don't think that's.
Okay, well, how about architectural design?
No, there's not. And similar to, we have no architectural requirements for a single family house. We don't dictate that. We wouldn't dictate it for the ADU. And as far as any place where you're allowed to build or have a modular or manufactured home, you would be allowed to use as an ADU. So that would be in right now any residential district by New York State law.
Okay, that's the problem I have. I don't like to have the manufactured homes. I don't like the way they look amongst some of the finer homes in the area and everything. And I think it's just going to change the whole dynamics of country living. I mean, I've lived here for 25 years now and have seen small changes over the years, but I don't want to see these large changes. And you know, instead of having a 5 acre minimum, you're all of a sudden saying you could basically have a 2.5 acre minimum built on. So that's where I came up with the double the population.
Right.
Anyways, thanks.
Okay. I think there was one other hand up there in the back, Hendrik. Yes, go ahead.
I just wanted to make a quick comment that while we are proposing an upper limit on ADUs, that says nothing on restrictions for smaller ADUs. And in my experience of ADUs, which are more typically found in more dense and urban locations, they're considerably smaller, on the order of 800 square feet. And so all housing is really expensive to construct right now, upwards of $600 or even $800 per square foot, and it ain't coming down. So these are not proposals to double the amount of housing. In practice, I'd be quite surprised if we saw the construction of many ADUs even with this legislation.
Okay. I'm going to move on to single lot exemptions because there's probably people here that wanted to discuss that. So really briefly right now, the draft code that we have for single lot exemptions, we go in chapter 170, which is the subdivision code. Again, like the other one, it starts out with a finding statement explaining the purpose of why we're doing this, including the required lot size of a parcel can have a significant impact on the cost and affordability of meeting the housing needs. So reducing residential lot sizes throughout the town would likely have a negative effect on the town because it would encourage us lots of subdivisions to come in. And so therefore, providing this one-time option for folks would be able to, I think, maybe perhaps strike a balance. As we get down to the authority, the planning board would have to authorize a single lot exemption. They would approve it according to the rules and procedures set forth under the subdivision code. And the owner of any parcel compliant with the acreage requirements for the zone in which it's located. So in other words, you'd have to have, your lot would have to meet all the current minimum lot size requirements and so forth. You couldn't do this on an undersized lot to begin with. The permitted locations, single lot exemptions would be approved in RL1, RL2, and RL3 zoning districts, not the hamlets, largely because those properties are already significantly smaller. And then limitations on use, only one such exemption, you'd only be allowed to do this once per property from any parcel, so that's limited. I believe one of the questions we got in from someone was, if we make a child lot under this provision, make a smaller lot, would that lot then be allowed to have a single lot exemption further on? And I don't think we stated, but the answer would be no. We don't want to create a Russian nesting doll of lots here. The subdivision shall result in the existing parent parcel being used to create a smaller child parcel, which is exempted from the normal lot size requirements. The new child parcel created must provide at least 1 acre in area with a minimum of 50 feet of frontage on a town, county, or state highway. The new child lot created may utilize a shared driveway with the parent parcel through an easement agreement, provided that a future dedicated driveway could be established if those two properties no longer wanted to share a driveway anymore. The maximum size of the new child lot created can be no more than 2 acres, so it would have to be between 1 and 2 acres. The maximum square footage, and this is an important one, the maximum square footage of the residential structure constructed on that child lot will be limited to no more than 2,000 square feet. Again, much like the ADUs, the intent of this is to create smaller, more affordable units. We didn't want this to be abused and someone to come and build a 6,000 or 8,000 square foot Airbnb mill. So the idea would be limited to 2,000 square feet. The front yard setbacks and the height limitations for the new child lot would be the same as for the rest of the zoning district, so that it would appear the same as the rest of the neighborhood. However, there would be a 20% reduction in the side and rear setbacks because we're dealing with a smaller lot, and so it makes sense to give it a little bit of flexibility. So those setbacks would be reduced to 40 feet. Oh, I forgot to keep clicking here. The parent lot remaining must remain sufficient lot width and frontage as deemed appropriate and sufficient by the planning board in consideration of the frontage used by the newly created child lot. For the purposes of creating the new child lot, the dwelling unit per acre density limitation of the zoning districts don't apply to the newly created. We need to do that to allow for the extra dwelling unit. Under decision and record, again, the planning board would need to authorize this and determine that such a subdivision would be applicable and meet some requirements. And upon determining that the application for a single lot exemption applies, the owner would submit a subdivision plat for that. The plat would be recorded, as I mentioned before, no further subdivision, so that this wouldn't allow, they wouldn't be allowed to subdivide again because this is a one-time option. And the town of Chatham would be required to maintain a map and a record of all of these one single lot exemptions so that we can better keep track of where they are. And importantly, the last item, expiration date, we put in a time limit on this. So this exemption would automatically expire after 2 years after the date of adoption, unless the town board decides, authorizes to extend it for another period of time, for a period of not more than 5 years each. The idea behind this is if we get 2 years into this and decide this isn't going the way we want, it can just automatically expire, and it would automatically expire unless the town board decided, no, we want to keep doing it. We put that in there as a safety valve to say, if we decide that this isn't working as intended, it will expire, basically. I believe that's it. Rick, sorry, do you have
I do have a question. If the town board were to pass an SLE and an ADU as, or close to as proposed, would these child lots be allowed to have an ADU? They would, as things currently stand, as I read it.
One of the recommendations, which I have got to, that I believe we got from the planning commission, I could be wrong where these came in from. Can an SLE be conducted on an undersized lot? And the answer is no, it has to be compliant. The planning board suggests that if a lot is subdivided as part of an SLE, it should not be able to have an ADU on a lot. That's what I think.
My recommendation too.
You would recommend, were you the one? No.
No, I'm not on that board.
While I've got it up, the planning board recommends the subdivision plat be noted, but no further subdivision. And can the child lot of an SLE be subdivided again as part of another SLE? The short answer to that is no. I don't think we state that per se here.
You need to.
But we should specify it just to clarify, even though I don't think it would be, I guess technically possible. We wouldn't want that to happen.
I do have a point to make, which is that I feel that the 1 to 2 acre and the 2,000 square feet are way too generous if we want to create affordable housing. I think you're inviting housing out of the price ranges that you showed up earlier, people making between, what did you have up there, 70 and 110?
Right.
At an acre to 2 acres and 2,000 square feet, this isn't going to help them.
Well, as was mentioned, you don't have to build 2,000 square feet. You can build 800. You don't have to build the full amount.
The town also doesn't
have 1 acre. Maybe that's something that could come down.
Yeah.
And we'd have to start once we start getting that small, we have to start actually mapping out how this would actually work out with the setbacks and everything. How big of a property would you be able to actually map that out? So
you should do that.
Okay. Yes, Gabrielle.
Did you mention the shared driveway with this?
Did I the shared driveway?
Yes.
Yes. The fact that I have another comment to read. Right now, as written, they would be allowed to have a shared driveway, provided that there's a way to accommodate a dedicated driveway if they decide they don't want a shared driveway. So, for example, if you do this to build a house for your parents or your child, and it just makes sense to just keep one driveway and share one driveway, that makes sense to us. But down the road, if the kids move out and you want to sell that property, you don't want to share the driveway anymore, the driveway can be made, the driveway can be made available then. That's our intent. We didn't want to force anybody to make a separate driveway if we didn't have to, but I understand we got 1 or 2 comments that said they did not like the shared driveway.
Right, a shared driveway in the future is always a problem for the reasons you have mentioned. And also, we don't know the topography. Often enough, people would want to give the acre, and then it doesn't have road access. So they're forced into a shared driveway because of the topography of the plat. So I would just be very careful with that.
Okay, another comment on that note that we got is, do we have anything in place that would prevent somebody from creating a flag lot to create this child lot? So in other words, you have a very narrow flag which goes way, way back behind their property, and some people call them lollipop lot. They're generally not a good idea. It was recommended we put in something to prevent that from happening. Sorry, I'm looking for, yes, at the white.
My name is Christian Newman. I live on 17 years North Chatham.
I can't tell who's speaking.
Christian Newman.
Christian Newman, sorry, you're right in the middle. Okay.
I think this proposal here is not well thought through. Your intent is to create affordable housing because of the crisis as you perceive it. What you're creating is small lots with smaller houses, which are very expensive. So why doing it? And just to get more people into the county to raise taxes, tell the tax base for everyone. Your intent is non-land, so you can predict that by the numbers you have read to us and by the other person has sent to you. Doesn't work.
Why do you say
Therefore, I'm saying it's because the housing, you're not creating affordable housing. It's going to be smaller lots with smaller houses at $600 to $800 a square foot. Who can afford that? Of those, I mean, there are people who can afford it, but not the people you want to help.
Yes, Angus.
So I keep hearing the big numbers for what sick belts are, the $600 a square foot. Yes, that's true for sick belt, but there's modulars now where it's more like $100 a square foot. So I understand the sick belt can be very expensive, but that's not all. And I think coming back to that, repeating that number, I think can be accepted. It is certainly possible to build for much less, and certainly I have friends who've done that.
Thank you.
I'm trying to catch somebody who hasn't gone yet in the back blue sweater. I'm not sure I get my colors right.
I'm Deborah Butler. I reside in the Concord area. And I just have 2 questions and comments. My family has had a home in this area for 49 years. You've got mail. We moved here because of small, rural, and agrarian. As a philanthropist, I helped found an organization to help Columbia County residents to have better opportunities and better futures. As an entrepreneur, I have been involved in housing renewal and preservation as a developer in Albany, New York. I also started a meat goat farm in 2001 because Cornell University's College of Agriculture and Life Sciences warned that milk cows alone were not going to be able to save our farmlands. Land-grant colleges are concerned about land preservation. There are a lot of people in this room that are concerned about land preservation. Professionally, I've worked in the area of public policy development for over 30 years, primarily with healthcare, housing, and insurance. availability and affordability have always been and continue to be concerns for government. I've been a policy analyst and problem solver for New York State governors and members of the New York State legislature for over 33 years, with a reputation as a trusted and honest broker, tough negotiator, who gets results and knows how to protect the public. I know about politicians. They enter politics for different reasons, prestige, power, perks, and some to do good works. They're not all-knowing or omnipotent. Some are smart, effective, some are dumb, hurtful, many are well-intended, but lack critical thinking skills in how to avoid unintended consequences. I think a lot of the parts of what you're hearing here today from people's comments are concerns about the people that have been proposing things do not have great critical thinking skills. Sorry, guys. You have good hearts, but you don't think things through. You keep hearing those concerns voiced throughout this room.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, I do have a question, but this is setting the tone and saying why people are upset. Nancy asked me why people are so upset, I don't know, a while ago, maybe in June. And I said, people are upset because of a history of being lied to, not people not agreeing with what a small group of people are committed to. People keep telling you for decades, small, rural, and agrarian. This is not to say people have no sympathy with the issue of housing affordability, but they do want definitions and quantifications. And if you say 1,000 people and you write a legislative intent that talks about a housing crisis in the area, you are opening this up to greater development than people in this room have tolerance for. And so I think, Nancy, I know that you don't like this kind of talk, but this is the reality of why you're getting pushback. People have been lied to on a number of different subject matters since this comprehensive plan were proposed, and people are tired of it. When you lose the trust of public officials, whatever a public official is trying to accomplish gets diminished. At the last public meeting, Angus, you lied twice in about 2 minutes.
Oh my God, come on.
Yeah, then don't lie. If you don't want to get called out, don't. Okay, I will. Yeah, okay. I have plenty, and I will go into it right now. And then if you want, I will. Abby, that's the problem. You're part of the problem.
Okay, calm down, everyone. 1, 2, 3, please. Thank you.
It's okay for you to be the lecturer. Anyway.
No, respect for the whole community and all, everybody's liars.
I have a question for Angus. Angus, you are a big promoter of more density. Why do you think density solves the affordability problem?
I think it's fairly well understood that the lot size is smaller, so you're not paying as much for land. And it's the other sort of restriction that we feel is important, I certainly feel is important, is also on the unit size. And I think if you're talking about a per square foot cost, whether it's stick built or modular, smaller will cost less. And small, and if it's $12,000 an acre, if it's 1 acre, that's less than 5 acres, right? Well, I mean, it seems kind of obvious.
I know that seems logical, but the marketplace, actually, the price goes down when you have more acres. the price goes up. I'm not talking about the total price. I am talking
The
about
price per acre.
the price per acre.
Right.
You have, and I'm not saying that it's a bad goal, you have talked about wanting to increase housing availability for the middle income people. I would ask you to please define what you mean by middle income, because that, you know, again, this goes back to people's concern, a little sloppy process because you don't seem to want to quantify these things. You did not actually get that big a response on how much can I afford. There were something, it was under 200 people. Now, many people make comments about housing, but you cannot add all of those comments to come to your comment to me, which was, oh, no, we've gotten over 1,000 people complaining about this. There were 1,000 comments, yes, you did. You did say that in the June 8th meeting, to me personally. At any rate, I'm going to go on. I have a list of things which I will submit, because I know, Michael, you don't always like people to submit comments in writing and have said, oh, that's way too formal for us. When we were meeting at the site, at any rate, I will put those comments in writing, which I have, and submit them, because that's what professionals do. I had some other questions, and these are.
I just want to be mindful that there's other people waiting.
I understand, and I waited, and I didn't make comments about the ADUs. So I'm gonna make my comments now about the single lot exemption.
But we didn't really sit here to hear a lecture.
Well, sometimes people need to hear a lecture, because people here are tired of being abused. Angus? I oppose single lot exemptions in RL1 and 2. This would damage the agricultural nature and agricultural viability of those districts. This prospect of food scarcity and affordability and growing concerns about things like climate change don't seem to be taken into account with the work of this group. You chair both committees. You work for environmental conservation. When you take such a siloed approach to things, it raises concerns about other issues. And quite frankly, you've broken this up. I don't mean you, I mean, well, it would be you, into smaller proposals. The concern is that you've got a fast agenda to pass things. People aren't really clear whether they can trust you anymore. And that's the truth. You can keep saying that, but you made your own bed.
Oh, my gosh.
Can we cut this?
Yeah, and I am going to cut it now, but I just want to say, people are disappointed in you, Angus.
Come on.
Can you, at the end of this, please give me your written comments and I will include.
I will.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I for one believe this is a great opportunity. And I for one think Angus and the town and zoning board are kicking butt and trying to make it work in this town.
Hello, hello, hello.
I think this is a viable proposition. My other point was Angus and the team are doing unbelievable amounts of work to make something happen. And it's very easy to come throw rocks at glass houses with no other better possibilities or anything but no change. Moving forward, just this morning, I spoke to a person who's lived here their whole life. Their daughter needs a place to live. They want to subdivide. They want to make a place for the trailer. The issue with making the two, this would work for them. This is a person that's grown up here their whole life. Their daughter is here living and working, and they want to be able to afford a place. This, they could make it viable for them to still live here, help them as they get older in their own house and have their own place. So there is vast opportunity for this to be viable. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and the sunglasses on.
Yes, okay, so, Yeah, so, okay, getting my thoughts together here. God, we have a lot of problems in Chatham, right? So I don't really believe that the plan or your thought process or like how you're sort of organizing this is gonna create a long-term sustainable plan. So that's one of my concerns. I'm not sure we're gonna hit our metrics and hit the objectives through the policy as written. I'm a fan of ADUs for other cultural reasons, but single lot exemption I think is a terrible idea. I'm a little disturbed because when I came to the comprehensive plan meetings, you got up in front of us and said, oh, well, you know, we're just gonna do single lot exemption around the village. And I really didn't like it then. And I'm really upset that, you know, I was kind of led to believe that, and then here we are looking to do it townwide. So again, so I don't believe that the single lot exemption proposal as written will achieve its legislative intent. I think it will exacerbate rather than alleviate housing affordability. I'm not quite sure why you're trying to do single lot and ADU together. It seems to me that ADU would accomplish something viable, not enough. I don't think single lot exemption ever works, and I would challenge you to, you know, give me an example of when it's worked to create affordable housing, and certainly at the metrics we're trying to hit. Anyways, it doesn't work. It didn't work again. Didn't try single lot exemption and didn't work to solve their problems. My next question is less to do with single lot, as it is to want to know why it is that you're not looking to explore developing a housing fund. Or why it is we're not trying to do something with subsidized housing, because we're trying to hit metrics of like $800 rents. Like, how are we gonna do that?
Right, fair question. I don't know that the town is ready, willing, or able to get into subsidizing housing. We're not necessarily in the real estate business. It's not something that we would manage. That would have to be through outside parties.
Right, well, there are other towns like Great Barrington, because, you know, Great Barrington used to be all farmland, and then they developed, they lost all their farmland, they developed everything, and they're still in the same pickle. You know, they tried all this cheeky stuff, and they're still in the same pickle, and they have, ultimately, they've had to develop a housing fund to deal with affordable housing in Great Barrington, and they're working with Habitat for Humanity. I just think there are a lot of options that would really actually help our community, and I wish you would start exploring them. So.
To your point about, you know, single lot exemptions provide the affordable housing. Fair enough. There are options and ways of doing it. For example, a senior looking to downsize, maybe they're in a large house that they don't want to manage anymore. If they wanted to build a single lot exemption, sell their house, use that money to build a small cottage off on the corner of their property that is one floor, it's really tailored to them, and
right, and it's
they
kind
would
of a
be able
cheap
to.
fix. Like it's a cheap short-term fix, right?
Okay.
But then you have this lot, and if you look at the real estate listings, smaller lots go for more money. In general, especially in a town like ours where there are, you know, all kinds of waves of people that would love to swoop in and get a little country house on 2 acres. There are plenty of people that want small houses, so I think it would be counterproductive to what we're looking to do.
Okay.
And there's no guarantee with it.
I just question, and there's a lot of folks here saying, you know, we shouldn't bother doing this because the numbers don't work, it's not financially feasible.
Oh, I'm not saying you shouldn't do anything, I'm saying you should do other stuff.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
The folks that are saying it's not,
You know.
it will never work. I don't think you're here to say it'll never work. That's not why you showed up to this meeting. Because if it's not gonna work, you have nothing to worry about. You can go home, there's nothing gonna happen.
Oh, but it will junk up our town.
The folks.
We don't want that.
The folks that I think are worried that it will work. And then it will create change. But then let's talk about, well, what is it about that change that you don't like? What can we do about that? Angus, go ahead.
Michael, can I just quickly say that you're saying we ignore, future solutions beyond the code? I don't think that's true. Now, I'll point to Nancy, who in every meeting that we have, she goes, we have to find a way to fund this. So I'll say that's not been forgotten.
Okay, I challenge you to actually do that, please. Instead of this other stuff, do that. You will have so much support from the community if you do this the right way. People here care. People who can afford to buy housing care.
We care too.
We care.
Sorry, yes, in the best, you have a microphone.
I'm concerned that single lot exemption will boomerang in the wrong way. I think it might be incredibly successful in terms of creating lots of lots, because people will have an opportunity for a limited period of time to parcel off a part of their lot. And we will be left with twice as many tax lots as we originally have. And maybe there'll be some affordable housing built, and maybe there'll be vacation lots. And maybe there'll be very expensive properties that are being built. But when we look around our territory, around our beautiful land and property, we're going to see a lot more houses than we're presently seeing. And that's probably going to have them being in the upper price range, because they're going to be building little houses next with big views. That is my biggest concern with everything I've heard here today, is that you're actually creating a lot more lots than we need, have the potential to create a lot more lots than we need, with the ultimate detriment to this entire community. My husband and I bought property here that was 10 acre zoning when we bought it. It was very significant to us that it was 10 acre zoning. Because we didn't want to see the land around us developed. We live in the hamlet of Malden Bridge. I'm very concerned about what is at risk for Malden Bridge. We are one of the small hamlets that were created before the Revolutionary War. They're historic properties. They're not big wide open spaces to be parceled down and to be brought up more like a village. Our hamlets and our villages, they're little walking museums through time. And 3 of our hamlets have already been designated as historic districts, and I'm going to say on the record that I believe the Malden Bridge should be given the opportunity to be a historic district if that's something that its residents want. But if you have large lots that are being parceled down bit by bit, peel by peel, Malden Bridge is not going to look like the hamlet that it is today. Thank you.
Okay, so just to recapture one of the things you said, part of your concern is that by putting the 2-year expiration date on this single lot exemption, that we might inadvertently be causing a rush on subdivisions with people rushing to get in time.
Absolutely. I think it would be economically sensible for a lot of people to do that individually. It wouldn't make sense from a plan.
Just in case they need it in the future.
Yeah, for the greater humanity in the town of Chatham. But I think it would make sense for a lot of people who don't necessarily need the economic benefit to carve off parcels on their property.
Would a total cap, town-wide, something that I don't know if we can institute something like that.
By zone.
Cap by zone.
Cap it by zone.
Something like that might be. Okay. Thank you, yes.
Hello again, Dan, the Chatham reporter. I don't have any questions, so I'll be very, very fast. The place that our small home is on used to be a fruit orchard. And then the farmer sold it, it was divided. This was, I think, 100 years ago. And the people that live there now are all active members of the community, and they're lovely neighbors. One of the people across the street from us recently had some personal health issues and divided a very large lot into 2 smaller lots that it was well within code. This wasn't a subdivision like we're talking about here today. The family that moved in is 2 young professionals with 2 kids and a dog. They are absolutely lovely. And it's heartwarming to see the next generation in this community. 2 small children are going to have stories about growing up here The professionals that have those children are from here originally, they were able to move back because of this division that happened in the larger lot. And for people that own slightly smaller lots, who aren't here today because they're all they're all younger, they have stuff to do. I think they would love a chance to be able to give back to the community by dividing their smaller lots and bringing the next generation in. So I just wanted to provide that perspective. Thank you for listening.
Don't know you, but I love you.
Could I just clarify with the single lot exemption, would the, what you call the child lot, be allowed to be anything other than a residence? Like a small business or a daycare center or anything like that? It would be restricted to being a residence, as I understand it.
Yes, if we're only allowing it in the RL1, RL2, RL3, I believe maybe we have to specify that it can only be used as a residence. I guess I kind of thought that was baked into it, but maybe we have to be more specific that it can only be used as a residence.
Yeah, I agree.
Especially considering this happens in the subdivision process. So the subdivision would get approved, and there's a later process by which you would then build something. There has to be a connection to show, hey, you can't put up a convenience store or whatever would be allowed in RL1, 2, 3.
Right.
But, okay, good point.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I want to read into the record the second half of one of the written comments that was submitted. I read half of it earlier. This half pertains to SLEs. They wrote, I would like it's my opinion that allowing this child lot exemption in RL1 and RL2 zones would be damaging to the agricultural nature and agricultural viability of those districts. I'm against this allowance at all in those districts. I think this child lot exemption should be restricted to RL3 and Hamlet 1 and 2 districts. The size of the lot should be restricted to no more than 3/4 of an acre in the RL1 district and no more than 1/2 an acre in the Hamlet districts. Each lot must have its own road frontage and driveway. As currently being described that there should be no shared driveways. The current proposal for a 2-acre maximum lot size is too large. Shared driveways can become a nightmare legally for future owners should ownership of either parent lot or child lot change. Lollipop lots should be prohibited as long driveways impinge on agricultural use and are not affordable to build and maintain. I believe that covers their comments on SLEs. Yes, sir, in the best. Everybody's wearing best today.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to give some perspective on this from a different angle. In the 70s, I lived in Los Angeles. I lived in San Fernando Valley. And what happened there was our drop-dead orchards, gorgeous orchards, grapefruits, olives, you think of it, they had it. By the time I left at the end of 10 years, they were all knocked down and there were condominiums coming and being built. So my fear is great intentions, I understand where you want to go. There was great intentions in Los Angeles and they failed. Just perspective.
Yes. Oh, Tim, I'm sorry. I thought you were trying to make a comment. I was trying to give the public a shot.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you were doing it for him.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Yeah. I'll listen to you, not Tim.
Ted Miner, enjoy about 60 acres we've accumulated over an old Chatham. And I guess I can identify myself as a guy with a lot of children, and I got 3 left in the area. And I'm sad about that. I have 2 concerns. As I understand it, the different zones within the town of Chatham have different lot sizes after great reflection, each of them. And I'm a great fan of paying real attention to that and honoring those reflections. I am not happy with being able to drop off 1 or 2 acres off of each one just to build a separate little unit. I believe with the quote unquote 60 acres, we can now in Old Chatham do that up to 6-10 spots and still be good. Legal, no problem. I sadly, wish to encourage those that own the minimum in each of the zones to not necessarily kick around separating 1 to 2 acres off their spot, thereby creating 2 small spots instead of just the 1, to explore alternative locations for their needs. But when you have the minimum, that's where you're at. I encourage the town to explore where they want to land some 1 and 2 acre lots. That's of course another completely other conversation. The second concern I have is 2,000 square foot houses. 2,000 square foot house is basically an 800 square foot house with another 1,200 feet on it. You've already got to have the 200 amp service, you got to have all the plumbing, you got to have the septic, you got to have all that nonsense. At the end of the day, the 800 square foot house might come in at, I'm going to use random arbitrary numbers here, but to back up what Angus was saying over there, you might come in at $400, $500 a square foot at 800, but the following 12 are only about 100 because you've already got the basics. And I would encourage Chatham to look at regulations. Bob Marini said it, that 35% of the cost of building is just following regulations. I'll give you 2 examples and then pass on. Septic. Septic system here in Columbia County to be reviewed and accepted. I defy anybody to put one in for less than $40,000 to $60,000. It's crazy. There are alternatives, there are viable alternatives. Unfortunately, none of them are acceptable because we're regulated right into this finite set of directions how to put in the state $40,000 to $60,000 septic system. Anybody wants to explore that, we'll want to talk about it later. And the other one is modular construction. In another life, I built modular homes in a factory, and ended up running one out in Indiana. I can tell you that since then, they've come a mile at times 10. As long as you anchor a manufactured house, in particular modular, properly to foundation, footing, or slab, you've got at least as good and better than most stick-built houses that are built around here currently. And they stack them, they put them side by side, the whole 9 yards. There's 6-inch walls, just like stick-built. Regulating acreage, or excuse me, regulating partials only to modulars in a broad view, I think that's a problem. Modulars to a dictate, that's a good thing. There's different companies out there building different things.
Sorry, can you explain that part a little bit better? I'm not sure I followed what you meant.
Modulars?
The last sentence or 2.
Anchoring?
Yeah.
Okay. So you've got these boxes that come out of the factory.
Right.
And they're built very common to, and sometimes in excess, inspected on site as they're built by HUD, by underwriters laboratories, and passed each step of the way with far more examination than stick-built houses get done today. It's humanly impossible to put the examinations on the stick-builts they put on the modulars as they're built within the factories. Okay, so they come out as a box, now we gotta land them. They have to be fixed to the slab, footings, or foundation, common to a stick-built house. Once you do that, you've got no variation, and as I said earlier, at least as good, and in many cases better than a stick-built. So I think there needs to be strong consideration for the town to review their thoughts on modular housing and allowable areas to put them. There's certainly a wild consideration in lowering the cost per square foot for this affordable housing concern that we have. Is that clear?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming here, by the way. And thank you, town board, for providing this venue. Town effort.
Yeah, sorry. That somebody has their hand up the back.
This is.
Hi there, I'm Lisa from the town of Chatham and also property owner in Austerlitz. I'm on this committee and I like the work that we're doing. We are doing our best. We're not trying to hurt anybody, and we understand that any suggestions that we make will be met with, some fear and anxiety, maybe some hostility. But what I want to say is, I grew up on 115 acres in the town of Austerlitz on a road that had 3 working dairy farms. And when I looked out our picture window across the valley at a mountainside, when I was about 13 years old, I could see lights on the mountain. There never was lights on the mountain. And a neighbor was at our house while I was looking out the window, and I'm like, I can't believe this. I have to look at lights now on that hillside. And the guy took his arms and he threw them up in the air, and he says, I'm here now, you can blow the bridge. So everybody that comes here thinks once they're here, it's time to shut it down. And I understand, like in historical villages, yeah, it's a snapshot of time that you're there and some of the history, but there's history before that, and there's going to be history after that. The people that are here that are trying to protect their properties, I respect that, but there's people that were here earlier that don't want their children to leave, that don't want their grandparents to leave, that want to see some continuity. And I think when we all work together, we form a very beautiful community. So I would just like to say that I think we need to trust each other a little bit. And then 2 small comments. One, I've heard agrarian. I don't know how many people here do dairy farming or vegetable farming, but farmers need workers. And there's no workers. There's literally no workers. There's no one to pick, there's no one to weed, there's no one to run farm stands, milk cows. We need those people here. So if we like farming, then we have to find some room for some farmers and their children and their workers. And then lastly, when it comes to styles of homes, whether it's stick-built or trailers, modulars, my father stood up at a town board meeting in Austerlitz after people were going after modular homes. And he stood up and he said, mansions offend me. So it's all in the eyes of the beholder. And I just hope that we can all work together, make a little room for each other, and come up with a solution. Thank you.
We've got, I just want to put this up on screen for the final minutes that we're here. That the address for the online comment form. If there's other folks that want to submit comments, we'll leave the comment form open for a while and collect them and give it to the committee to discuss. But I want to keep going with question. I just want to put that up on the screen. Yes, ma'am.
It's been interesting hearing what they had to say here, and I think, I think this goal is admirable. I think you need to put as many hedges around it as possible to make sure that the people it's intended to help are helped. And I think your belief in the goodness of human nature is lovely, but I don't know, I can't share it, and I think you just gotta put rules, as many as you can, so that the people who we want to help are helped.
Right. Oh, yes. Again.
Yeah. Again, like I was hoping maybe you could eventually answer my question of where single lot exemptions ever worked.
Oh, I mean, I don't have specific examples.
All right, well, at some point, I would love to hear that and see if there's anywhere in the universe where this policy has worked. I think it's worth looking into. I think one of my other issues with the approach that the committee's been taken, is that it's not looking at like the big picture. And it's always like, oh, we're just gonna deal with housing, but like, to me, you can't parse those two things out. It's like, if you were saying, hey, look, like, we have all these maps that we've made over the years, and we know there's like a ton of prime farmland that we're trying to preserve over here, and we're going to restrict certain housing types in this area so that we can increase housing type, affordable housing in other areas. I would be so much happier and on board with all of these policies and building things you want to do, but because that's not on the table, I don't really want to sign up for any of this, because you've just been unwilling since the beginning of this process to sort of look at it from that perspective, or to put any care into having a discussion about our forests and what we want to do with them. Having discussions about how much of our farmland we want to actually preserve. Because we're in theory trying to do that, whether it's for open space, for environmental reasons, or actually for an agricultural economy. I just think we need to have a better plan as far as placement. So, I've said that about 1 million times, but I'm going to say it again until you listen.
Okay, any other comment? Does anybody need to go back to, I hope we didn't just lose Zoom. Does anybody need to go back to accessory dwelling units or cover anything? Yes, sir, in the back.
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
I'd like to ask a question. If you say you have 5 acres and and you cut out 1 acre, now you got 4 and they got 1. What's to stop people say my taxes have gotten too high, I'm too old? This is an example. And I want to sell that 1 acre and lower my tax debt a little bit, buy a fifth hopefully. And so I just sell it. And somebody comes up, wants a second home or a weekend home, buys that 1 acre cheaper because it's gonna be a cheaper home than if they buy at 5 acres and a bigger house. And that's very, a lot of people are looking for that. So what would stop that? Well, that would cut out the people that live here still, a lot of it, I think. And I want to include the people that live here, but what would stop that from happening?
But we don't have a mechanism for limiting the sale to a family member, or there's currently no mechanism for doing it. So that's a good point.
Right, so how do you stop that from happening? That would go wild. That could be a whole new organization.
Cottage industry.
And I would love to have local affordable housing. I have children, I lived there all my life, I have children that cannot afford to live there. And they do live here. So, that's all I have to say.
Just a few minutes over time. Any last comments before we wrap up? I don't know how quickly we're gonna get kicked out of here. We have 2 more comments in the back, and then I'll take you in the front. Yes.
Okay, just a reminder that if you think about the old barns and the old farms and the rural agrarian landscape that Chatham used to be, the working farms, the cows, they all had a side building. They all had structure for the workers. If they weren't living in the house, they were living somewhere on site. They didn't drive in or ride the horse. Well, some might have, but there were people on the farm tending the farm. This is that same possibility where there's a place on the farm, on the land, for someone to be there living and working and driving. Thank you.
I would just like to say that I think both of these options are very possible and can work very well. I do think both proposals need work before they're finalized. When I hear people talking about what people can afford and the level that they should be paying rent, I don't know when that's happened around here. People are struggling, they pay higher rent, and they'll do the same thing if they have another place to do it at. I just think that we need the housing, and I think that the committee has come up with some good solutions. So.
As I mentioned, if there are other comments, please submit them through our online comment form, and if you have them in writing, please drop them off. It makes my life easier in putting together the notes for all this. So I love written comments. Spoken comments, I have to listen to and read and type. Pain in the butt. So thank you. We're going to take all of this in committee. Sorry, as a member, is there something you need to add?
Yes, as a quick comment, my name is Nancy, I'm a member of the Housing Committee. First off, I'd like to say thank you to everybody for coming today and joining us. This is a very important conversation we're having. I just want to point out that we do meet on a regular basis, and especially now that so many people have graciously given us their emails to receive the town email, you'll know when our meetings are taking place, and we always encourage participation. So please join us, please come to meetings, and you can have a say and some input as these things are taken issue. But thank you again for coming today.
Yes, thanks. Wait, sorry, one more.
I don't think you factored in the tax breaks into your equation as to the affordability of these houses. You've got tax breaks, and you've also got the reduced cost for manufactured housing per square foot. And regulation costs all need to be considered, and I think it was presented with those things in mind, that it would be more acceptable and appealing.
That was our thought. But again, we don't know if the tax exemptions or tax breaks would come. That would be if the shadows of the town and or hopefully the school district would be interested in allowing that. I think the school district has it in its best interest to maybe encourage some more, because they would like to get some more younger workers as well. I think that's it. Thank you. Again, everyone getting yelled at. This is all this to get rid of stuff. Thank you.